Good morning. So we have finally come to the day that we have been waiting for, the most anticipated, our fourth annual virtual conference. A very warm welcome to our participants and speakers to the fourth ELT virtual conference. It is with great pleasure we gather today to embark on a journey for exploration and innovation in the field of education, language, and teaching. As we navigate the dynamic landscape of education, our theme for this year's conference is Breaking Boundaries, Transformative Approach in ELT. Serves as a guiding beacon. It calls upon us to change the status quo, push the limits of traditional teaching methodologies, and embrace new horizons in language education. Our lineup promises a wealth of knowledge and inspiration today. Throughout the day, we have the privilege of hearing from distinguished speakers who are leaders in their fields. They will share their expertise, insights, and vision for the future of ELT. But beyond the session and presentation, this conference is about the collective energy and passion that each of you brings. It's about the conversations, the ideas exchanged, and the connection made that will prosper our field forward. As we embark on this journey together, let us approach each session with open minds, ready to learn, unlearn, and relearn. Let us engage in this dialogue that challenges assumptions, spark creativity, and foster collaboration. In the words of William Butler Yeats, education is not the feeling of a pail, but lightning of a fire. So let this conference ignite that fire within us all, inspiring us to create transformative change in our classrooms, institutions, and communities. Thank you for being part of this incredible gathering. Together, let's embark boundaries, forge new paths, and redefine the future of English language teaching. Wishing you all an enlightening and enriching conference ahead. Well, welcome. So here we are, joining now. Without further ado, I would like to start the session with the keynote speaker, Sir Krashen. Sir Krashen, are you there with us?
I am here with pleasure and with coffee.
So you can kindly open your video.
Didn't I do that?
We are unable to see you.
Okay, you can see me though, right? You just can't hear me.
There you are. There you are. Now we are able to see you. Thank you. Do you have any presentation to share, sir?
Do I have presentation? Of course. I can't wait.
You can share your presentation now.
Okay, here comes the presentation. This topic to me is exciting. I love talking about it, and I think it's going to make life much, much easier and more pleasant for students and teachers. With that in mind, let me start in. I'm going to start with defining the two most common terms in our profession, acquisition and learning. We all know about these. We know that acquisition is subconscious while it's happening. You don't know it's happening. We know that learning is conscious learning. In terms of grammar, it's knowing the rules, being able to state them. And we all know that school has focused on conscious learning since most of us have been in the profession, okay? We rely on conscious learning in our teaching, but we're beginning to suspect it doesn't work very well. There's a lot of empirical evidence in technical papers. I want to give you some testimony from a polyglot I admire very much. His name is Steve Kaufman. Some of you have heard about him. The last time I looked, Steve had acquired 15 languages, and get this, 8 between the ages of 61 and 71. I want to know what happens when you're between 80 and 90, but I'll let you know in 10 years, okay? Steve gives us some very nice, Dr. Kaufman gives us some very nice description of what happens when he relies on grammar, okay? Quote, I would usually remember grammar rules or explanations if I understood them, only for a short period of time and then forget them. In the end, it was only through enough exposure to the language that my grammar improved. In other words, we acquire the more powerful process when we hear, when we get input, and when we understand what we hear or read when we obtain what is called comprehensible input. This is not my idea. I'm not the only, I wrote a paper called Who Invented Comprehensible Input? And I pointed out that even though I'm the author, it's not the title. A lot of people knew about it before I did, knew about it in language arts and reading. Frank Smith knew about it. I just like the idea and like to find evidence for it. We acquire language when we understand what we hear and read. We do not acquire language when we speak or write. We don't acquire language when we consciously learn grammar rules or when we get corrected. The ability to produce language is the result of acquiring it. The cause is comprehensible input. The result is acquisition, okay? We think now the best input for acquisition has some very obvious characteristics. Number one, it's comprehensible, of course. Number two, it's interesting. Let me repeat that and say very interesting. We've ignored this in most of our language classes. In fact, I like the term compelling. Compelling means it's so interesting, you forget that you're listening to another language or reading another language. That is compelling input. That is the most efficient, I think. And it works when you get a lot of it. So 3 characteristics. It's comprehensible, it's extremely interesting, and there's a lot of it. I'm going to demonstrate this by giving you a couple of language lessons, and I'll use a language I'm sure you've heard, but I doubt that very few of you speak. Here's lesson number 1. Wir werden jetzt anfangen, Deutsch zu lernen. Und ich möchte Ihnen voraussagen, dass nach meiner Meinung Deutsch ist eine sehr schöne Sprache. Und ich hoffe, dass Sie alle sehr viel Erfolg mit Deutsch haben werden. I don't think you got very much of that unless you've already had some exposure to German. That's lesson number 1. Lesson number 2, and if you can, it would help if you look at me on the screen. Das ist mein Kopf, mein Kopf. Hier sind meine Ohren, meine Ohren. Ich habe 2 Ohren. 1, 2. Hier sind meine Augen. Ich habe 3 Augen. 1, 2, 3 Augen. Nein, wir haben nur 2 Augen, okay? If you understood what I said, not every single word, you acquired a little bit of German. This is how we get language, when we understand what we listen to. We do not get it when we speak. When I first started teacher training, I was a student at UCLA. It was a good program, but it was before we knew what was going on. I did had a little instruction. We were asked to, do a lesson. So I did a lesson. I spoke to the students and I spoke a story. I gave a story to the students and I thought it was pretty good. The teacher disagreed. The teacher said, no, the students should be talking, not you. That's how they'll get better. No, without realizing it, I was right. The teacher was wrong. We acquire language when we listen and understand. I'm going to name 3 benefits from getting interesting, comprehensible input, and my examples are going to come from reading. Reading is not the only game in town, but it really works and it's easy to talk about, okay? As I said, our speaking and writing ability comes from reading, our grammar, our spelling, our vocabulary, and I put as much research as I could find into this book, published in 2004. I'm going to recommend it to you, but I'm going to make it easier than it is now. Filled with stories, anecdotes, research, everything I could put in. I'm really happy with this book, and I hope you read it. Don't buy it. It's too expensive. Every morning I look at the prices. Oh my goodness. This morning, The Power of Reading was something like over $20. The highest one was $25, but you can buy it used for $1.50. So be smart, get it used. I don't make any money on it, but I don't deserve the money at these kinds of prices. I want to give one experiment that shows that this is true. And this was done by a former student of mine, Fei Xin, with one of her students. And it's called Sophia's Choice because Sophia is the one who is the main character. Sophia came to the United States speaking Chinese as her first language from China, and in the 5th grade. When she got there, what they do with beginning students is they give them an English test the very first day. And then the end of they're probably way down here, right? Then at the end of the semester, they give them another test looking to see how much they've improved. Sophia, every year they did it, got worse. Her English competence went down, down, down. Wow, what was going on? How could that be? Well, when the school year was over, she was tested and her scores went down. She then went home. What did she do when she went home? It's pretty hot in Los Angeles, and the library's air conditioned. So Sophia went to the local public library, sat in the air conditioned section, and read lots of easy, comprehensible, interesting books in English. Her favorites, Sweet Valley High, okay? Books that are very easy for students and pretty good. Nancy Drew is another favorite. I've read a couple of Nancy Drews. They're surprisingly good, as a matter of fact. So that's how she got better. She got better by doing self-selected pleasure reading. And if she didn't like the book, she put it down and picked up another one. She averaged 50 books over each summer. And that's why we call it Sophia's Choice. She chose reading over what happened in those classes. Well, people have complained about this. They said one criticism is if you read these easy books all the time, you get simple vocabulary. We want our students to have academic vocabulary so they can go into classes and understand things. Jeff McQuillan, a colleague of mine, has done studies of this and to see how much academic language you get when you do pleasure reading. Surprise, quite a bit. Dr. McQuillan looked at 7 Harry Potter novels, all 7, and he found out that if you read all 7 of these books and you're, an intermediate beginner, you will gain about 200 words, okay? He estimated that picking up these words by reading is 3 times as efficient as doing it through direct instruction. So benefit number 1 of reading for pleasure, everybody, relaxing and enjoying a book, you get language, you get grammar, you get vocabulary, you get spelling, you get writing style, all these things. Benefit number 2, the more reading you do, pleasure reading, largely fiction, the more you know. The more you know about everything. The more you know about I got a whole list here. The more you know about science, social studies, current events, personal finance, health, technology, cultural knowledge, multicultural literacy. They went to high schools and they gave students tests on how much they knew about these things. And for example, one test was on physiology. What part of the body does the infection called pneumonia occur? Okay. Who are these people? Linus Pauling, Isaac Newton, Bertrand Russell, etc. No, Donald Trump was not on the list, fortunately. People who did better, who had more general knowledge, were those who read more popular, everyday literature. That is wonderful. They read things like books by Maya Angelou, Stephen King, magazines, Forbes, Ladies' Home Journal. Grade point average in school was a poor predictor. It was very weak. You get more knowledge of things around you by reading fiction than by actually studying this stuff. Well, that's two things we get. Number 1, we get speaking and writing ability, etc. Number 2, we get knowledge of all these areas. People who know more are those who've read more. Number 3, people who read more have a deeper understanding of other people. They have more empathy. Isn't that nice? There's research on this. It's a little bit boring. So instead of going through the research, I'm going to tell you what 3 fairly well-known people have said about this. One of them is a radio personality in LA radio. Her name is Terry Gross. She's the hostess of a program called Fresh Air. And boy, when she said this, I wrote it down. It really, I think, captured everything. When you're learning to read fiction, what you're learning in part is empathy. You're learning to be somebody else, to see the world through their eyes. Isn't that exactly right? You become the character. Another person I'd like to quote, some of you may have heard of, Barack Obama. When I think about how I understand my role as citizen, the most important stuff I've learned, I think I've learned from novels. How do you like that? It has to do with empathy. It has to do with being comfortable with the notion the world is complicated and full of grays, but there's still truth there to be found. It's possible to connect with someone even though they're very different from you. I have kind of secondhand evidence about Barack Obama, what kind of a person he is. I get to brag when I tell you this. My son, who's a mathematician, won an award for his undergraduate accomplishments in math. And the students in the school who won awards were invited to the White House. Can you imagine? And Danny, my son, got to talk with Barack Obama. So I asked him, I said, what was it like talking to President Obama? He said, it was awesome. He listens to you. He listens to what you say and responds appropriately. This is empathy for others, okay? Third one, another unknown you've never heard of, Noam Chomsky. It is quite possible and overwhelmingly probable that we'll always learn more about human life and personality from novels than from scientific psychology. Novels tell us about people. Reading. So we got three things here. We get a better understanding of others. We've got language you get from it, and you get knowledge. That's nice, all while you're having a pretty good time reading books that you're interested in reading, where you want to know what's going to happen next, et cetera. Well, I've talked about reading. Let me put in a word about writing. What does writing do for us? When we write, does that increase our language? No. Writing is output. We acquire language by input, but writing does something else, something I think is absolutely wonderful. I learned about this from a mathematician named Poincaré, who wrote an article about this in 1924. He said when he reaches a block in his work, a writer's block, which we've all had, I'm going to teach you to love writer's blocks, okay? After a preliminary period of conscious work, Poincaré would get up from his desk and do something that took very little thinking, like putting more wood on the fire. When he got a writer's block, he got up and did something boring. Returning to his work only minutes later, the solution, or at least parts of it, would often appear. In other words, incubation took place. My hypothesis is that your subconscious mind really wants to help you. When you get a writer's block, some problem on your mind, do nothing, relax your mind, and little pieces of the solution to the writer's block, will appear and help you out. Eckhart Tolle said something very similar. All true artists, whether they know it or not, create from a place of no mind, from inner stillness. My advice, take a break when you're blocked. Keep pencil and paper with you all the time. It's dangerous, of course, to do it when you're driving. When I get an idea when I'm driving, I pull off the road. Something personal. I take pencil and paper with me, you know where, which I won't talk about, just in case something occurs to me, okay? Never take a chance. For me, the composing process is try to write, have a block, take a quick break, and parts of the answer will come, okay? So this is the complete course in writing. Write about things that are interesting to you. When you get a writer's block, be happy because it means you're about to learn something. Writing for me is writer's block after writer's block, and I expect it, I'm used to it, and I like it because it means I am learning things all the time, okay? Well, I've talked for over 20 minutes nonstop. I thought I would just go for 25, but I really want to know what your questions are. So let's do that. Let's move into questions and then we'll see what's left over. Okay? Take a 1-minute break and you'll get
Thank
new
you,
ideas.
Sir Krashen. Thank you so much. Do we have any questions? You can write in the chat box or you can even
I
direct it
can't
to
read
your.
the chat box for some reason.
I will
So,
read it out to you, no worries.
okay, thank you.
If you have any questions, you're please welcome to ask now, sir.
The question I'd like to know is how many of you are familiar with these ideas of taking a
Okay.
break when you get a writer's block? Does it happen? I never thought about it until I read these experts talk about these things, but I think it's helped my writing more than anything I can imagine. It's helped my thinking. In fact, a couple of days ago, I got another idea. I can't help telling you about it because it's so exciting. I've been taking breaks before I get a writer's block. When I do that, a deliberate break, or just do nothing, whatever is on my mind, we call it worries, come into my mind. Happens to you, right? I then think of some small thing I can do to solve the problem, the source of the worry, and that helps enormously. Again, your subconscious mind wants to help you.
We have a question here, sir. So earlier you mentioned a study that showed reading was more effective than explicit instruction. Could you repeat the name of the author or the study?
I said that? Of course I said that. The author. All kinds of, well, it's all those studies in my book, The Power of Reading. It's all over the place, ladies and gentlemen. Everywhere you go. Explicit study of grammar and spelling and all those things don't do very much. In fact, they just cause pain and frustration.
Mhm.
What happens is just plain reading and you absorb it. So if you want all the research, take a look at The Power of Reading and get a used copy if you can.
Someone is saying, I used to get frustrated when I had a writer's block. This is a fantastic news how we can get rid of it now.
Not only you want to get rid of it, but you want to thank your mind that it gave you writer's block
Yeah,
because you're about to get the solution to a problem that you had. Writer's block is a problem that you have personally, and your subconscious mind is about to help you solve it. This is the best news possible. Yep, it happens all the time, every moment. And the difference between me and an inexperienced writer is that I expect it and I like it. Okay.
Dr. Aisha is saying she faced it when she was doing her PhD. She understands what a writer's block is.
Absolutely. And it's good. Okay, algo más.
We have another one. We have Ms. Lamia saying, yes, it happens all the time. I had a writer's block the other week and all the ideas started pouring in at my head as soon as I get on a plane traveling from one city to the another. So that's where I think we need the pen and paper with us.
Right. But you can do it on your own anytime. I
Yeah,
have a
as long as she was not flying the plane herself.
yeah, exactly. Thank you. That's exactly right. Glad you said that. I have a place to relax. And whenever a writer's block just shows up, I go right to the sofa, close my eyes, and the answer starts coming. Little bits and pieces of it, not the whole thing. It's not you
Yeah,
read, this is the answer to all my problems, but little bits, little bits. And as you keep working, eventually the whole thing comes.
definitely. Yes. We have another kind. Reading helped me getting over writer's block. Yes. And then we have someone saying, yes, once reading has helped us succeed in acquiring a new language, surely we must then cement the learning with specific or speaking practice. Yeah.
No speaking practice. There, there are stories of people who go through months and years of a silent period.
Yeah.
And it certainly happened to me. It happens to me all the time. In fact, just like with you, I have several languages that seem to be lying dormant. Okay. Some of them I haven't spoken, let's say, in 10, 15, 20 years. And suddenly I'm in a position where I'm supposed to speak the language and I do okay. In fact, I'm amazed. It's happened to you too. It's happened when you have already acquired a great deal of language. especially if you do a little bit of reading in your spare time. How about that? Reading counts. You don't have to be speaking. You don't have to be writing. Language acquisition comes from input, not output.
Yes, and we have interesting question. Should pleasure reading be assessed?
No. Oh my goodness, no. I'm so glad you asked. Oh, talk about destroying the whole idea. It's pleasure reading. That's the whole thing. We've been torturing kids with this so many years. My gosh. When I was in sign reading, et cetera, when I was in secondary school back in the Midwest in the United States, I took language arts and English, and it was assigned reading of the classics. We spent 1 year on English literature, 1 year on British literature. Okay. Today, I don't remember the name of a single book that I read in all those years of language arts. Neither do you. But I do remember the name of the books I decided to read. I'll tell you what I read when I was a little kid, when I was in elementary school and in high school. Number one, comic books. This all began when I was in the 3rd grade and I was in the low reading group. My father brought home comic books. Within a year, I was in the upper group. So don't worry, read all you want. I'll pay for them, etc. That did it. The other thing I read was baseball stories. There's an American writer named John R. Tunis who wrote all these stories about the Brooklyn Dodgers, and they were exceptional. I'll tell you about one because I wrote a paper on this. I liked it so much. It was called The Keystone Kids. And this is what you can get in reading you get yourself, that's so-called junk reading that isn't. It's a baseball team, and the manager of the team retires. And the shortstop of the team, one of the players, takes over as manager. He's only like 25 years old. And he gives the players a speech, a sermon the first day in order to get their confidence. It's so good. I have a copy of it in my notebook. He says, well, I'll explain a little about baseball. If you're at bat and you hit the ball, you run to first base. And if you get there before the ball does, before the throw, you're safe. Otherwise, you're out. Now, in professional baseball, you're going to be out 99 times out of 100 because these are people, the ball's anywhere near them, they're going to catch it. The throw is always going to be perfect. So what some players do, they assume they're going to be out and they just stroll along and take their time. Well, in John R. Tunis's book, the manager says, don't do this. Run like hell. The first baseman might drop the ball. The throw might be wild. You might lose the game because you didn't, the word is hustle. A good friend of mine, Dr. Seymour, told me that this is true of medicine. Same thing. You have a patient with a disease. It seems obvious. You know what to medicine, blah, blah. Make sure it's the right medicine. Look again. Make sure there are no side effects. If there's a mistake, it can be very, very serious. So since that time, I have been trying to be impeccable in small things in my life. And that's what you get from ordinary fiction. So baseball stories were very, very good. Comic books were very, very good. I could take the rest of the day and tell you wonderful comic book stories. And I'll just close with this on this question. I really think that Spider-Man is one of the greatest, best characters in American literature. If you haven't read any, check it out. Okay, do we have time for more questions?
Yes, just one more, Sir Krashen. So what would you say to writers who are now using AI, something that you were concerned when we spoke the other day?
EI, tell me.
So what would you say to writers who are now using AI for their
Oh,
writing?
AI, artificial. Okay.
Yes, artificial
Goodness.
intelligence.
Oh my goodness. I will quote Noam Chomsky on this, who said it is simply a form of plagiarism, and it doesn't work very well. The whole idea of writing is to learn new things as you write. Get stuck, get a writer's block, work on it, take a break, and write something else. Learn while you write. This takes this away completely and takes away the major virtue of writing. The major virtue of writing is that it makes you smarter. It allows you to take things you don't understand, think about them, come up with better solutions. So I am not excited about using artificial intelligence methods.
Right, interesting. One more question. Can pleasure reading also include blogs, magazines, articles, song lyrics, exchange books with your classmates?
I don't want to define pleasure reading for people. It's really up. So go ahead. I define it as comic books, and people might get upset with that too. So that's fine. It depends. There's some fascinating blogs, I'm sure, depending on the author. And I would just leave it as a vague, open definition.
Great,
Good question.
thank you. Thank you so much. If we don't have any more questions, we will stop here. Okay, so Michelle Hunter says the point of learning a language is acquiring a language is to communicate. Sorry, I missed her comment somewhere. It's pretty late for you, Sir Krashen. We're really honored to have you and really sorry to bother you this late.
My pleasure, please. Thank you.
Yeah. So if anybody wants to open the mic and communicate one last time before we wrap up Sir Krashen's session. Everybody is thanking you. Just a few tips for the new teachers.
I have a couple more things to say I forgot.
Sure, so sure.
At my age. None of this is going to work unless we work on our libraries. This all depends on libraries, libraries, libraries. The research on libraries is very, very good. Keith Curry Lance, et cetera, all these people, they do wonderful work. I'm a member of the library associations. I told you that my son is a mathematician. My daughter is a public librarian. Isn't that wonderful? I'm so happy. Okay. So it's the library is it. And this makes acquisition easy because it doesn't cost anything when you have a library.
True, true. And I think that is the saddest part when I had one of the comments saying students are more, or kids, younger generation is more glued towards TikTok and all those of social media, and they're acquiring language from there because they're not finding a good book, isn't it?
Well, I don't know. We really don't. I've never seen a study of this. So we better relax until we get the word out. Maybe it's good for you. I doubt it. I think you're probably right, but I would never state a professional opinion on this. And once you get comic books, magazines, and good books, I'll add something more. A good way, how do you encourage reading? There's a good way of doing it. There's two ways. Number one, and this, a teacher said this in the school library journal, when a student sees a book they really, really like, have them put a mark in it. Then other kids will see the mark. And you see a book with 10 yes signs on it, other kids are going to read it, okay? Another good way of getting kids into the library, again, this is in the school library journal, take a bunch of comic books, good ones, spread them out on the big table in the middle. Kids will come in and look at the comic books. They've done that. Comic book reading goes up. All reading goes up. Wow. So there's a lot of wisdom out there in the field. I'm optimistic.
Great. Thank you so much, Sir Krashen. We really appreciate your time. And everybody's thanking you in the chat box. They're finding it really interesting. Your talk was very informative for them. And we are honored to have you as well at our conference today. Really appreciate it.
Great.
Thank you.